Some of the polls are just closing in New Hampshire. Thank you for joining us this hour for America's Vote 2024, the New Hampshire primaries. Let's check in now with Washington correspondent Basil John. Basil, what do you have for us?
Well, Michael, polls are closing soon, and with the field down to just two candidates, both Donald Trump and Nikki Haley are pulling out all the stops to stake their claim on New Hampshire.
Happy Election Day!
The New Hampshire Secretary of State predicts record voter turnout in this first-in-the-nation primary.
And I think one person will be gone probably tomorrow.
Former President Donald Trump is predicting a landslide win in New Hampshire.
You do have a wild card here. You have people that could vote that aren't Republicans. What's that all about?
Haley says she's hoping for a strong showing with the help of those independent voters who are eligible to vote in the Republican primary.
I'm running against Donald Trump, and I'm not going to talk about an obituary.
Haley's team says a second-place finish here in New Hampshire would be just fine.
We're going to be even stronger than that in South Carolina.
I don't care if she stays in. Let her do whatever she wants. It doesn't matter.
Keeping a decades-long tradition, the tiny community of Dixville Notch voted at midnight. Haley won all 6 votes.
We're very grateful for that. It's a good start to the day.
Now, both Haley and Trump will be in New Hampshire tonight and are expected to speak to their supporters once the results come in. Reporting live in Manchester, I'm Basil John.
Basil, tell me, how will independent voters play a factor in this primary?
Yes, well, independent voters actually make up about 40% of New Hampshire's voting population. So even if Haley does not come out on top in this contest, just being able to separate that difference to single digits between her and former President Donald Trump could make a huge difference in the long run.
All right, Basil, thank you so much for joining us from New Hampshire. And back with me now is Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, welcome back.
Here we go.
So, look, we're officially past 7 p.m. now here on the East Coast. What is happening now in New Hampshire? Because some of the polls have closed.
Some of the polls have just closed in New Hampshire. The next round of polls closing within the next hour. And we're already getting some exit results and exit polls about what really could shape the dynamics of tonight, right? And what I just found out from the ABC News exit polls is that 8% of those who voted identified as Democrats. Okay. That is double the previous record set in the state, according to ABC News.
Really? Wow.
CNN, that's good news for Nikki Haley.
Sure, of course.
CNN has some exit polls that suggest, are you a member of the MAGA movement? 32% said yes, 64% said no. They are not a member of the MAGA movement. That would seemingly indicate good news for Nikki Haley. Right. If Nikki Haley, according to her campaign, is able to keep the margin of Trump's victory within single digits, they're going to argue that it's justification not only for her continued staying in the race, but also for an opening that she could in fact clinch the nomination. In contrast to that, Trump wants to win, and he wants to win big league. Right. And he argues that if he's able to get the margin of victory in double digits, this thing is tough for Haley to justify momentum heading into the Nevada caucus, as well as South Carolina, where she was governor but lost the endorsement of Senator Tim Scott, the current senator, Republican from South Carolina, who backed Trump. In addition to the momentum that she would need, not just to turn out supporters on Super Tuesday, but also to mobilize an operation. I've got my eye on 2 parts of the New Hampshire map, the Granite State map. Okay. I'm going to be watching very carefully Concord, New Hampshire. That's the state capital. There are a lot of independents in Concord, New Hampshire, a lot of state employees who work in the capital in Concord, New Hampshire. If independents turn out who are working in the state government, I would argue that that could precisely be some good news for Nikki Haley, particularly when she's got the governor, Kristen Nunu, backing her campaign. Right. In contrast to that, if they don't show out or you start to see Concord results coming in and it's going for Trump, or the margin is close in Concord, likely going to be a good night for Trump. Number 2, Amherst. Amherst is a conservative part of the state that's been trending more Democrat and blue in recent cycles. Trump only beat Kasich. Remember, he was the guy back in 2016, former governor of Ohio, by 3 percentage points in Amherst.
That's it.
So if Amherst shows up big, when you've got 8%, according to ABC News, identifying as Democrats, if turnout's big at Amherst, good night for Haley. Concord, Amherst, that's what I've got my eye on.
And this then brings us back to the other stat from some of those exit polls about who is actually voting in this race. So you mentioned the 8% are liberals, are Democrats. That's important to note. Let's also talk about these registered undecided, these folks who we've really been focusing a lot in New Hampshire, because these are people who didn't have to be part of a party before, thought to be Nikki Haley supporters, which is why she's had a leg up in this state. According to a CNN exit poll, 47% of folks who voted in today's primary are those registered undecideds. 49 are registered Republicans. I mean, that's almost an even split. So based on that, I mean, look, would it be better if Nikki Haley, if the undecided register, if the unregistered, the registered undecideds, it's a tough one right there. Would it be better if that one had an edge for Nikki Haley? Absolutely. But talk about the fact that they're almost evenly split.
Well, they're almost evenly split, and this is where it gets interesting. In Iowa, moderates were only 9%. In New Hampshire, 31%. But what is a moderate in New Hampshire? Right. And this is what I think everyone is going to be perusing, because are they deciding between Trump and RFK, or are they deciding between Nikki Haley and President Biden? Right. That's what we don't know. That's what we're going to watch. The exit polls ranking according to the issues are a bit different than the Decision Desk HQ national rankings, where you've got the economy still ranking as #1 in New Hampshire, immigration second. If you poll Republican voters, those are literally Trump's two strongest issues with what he polls on, immigration and the economy. We don't know. But there's the psychology of New Hampshire, and I'm not a shrink, but I do think it's worth noting.
Just a numbers geek.
Just a nerd, yeah. But I do think it's worth noting that New Hampshire voters, Democrats and Republicans and independents, like to send a message to the country. Right. And in 2008, they sent a message that they wanted Hillary Clinton to continue to challenge Barack Obama, who ultimately won the White House in a historic election. But it was a long, long primary. Right. And Obama had won Iowa. But what happened was Hillary lost New Hampshire, right? So she won it in 2008, lost it in 2016 to Bernie Sanders. So there's a precedent. What I'm trying to argue and illustrate, rather, is there's a precedent for New Hampshire voters picking one candidate one cycle, and when that candidate is on the ballot again, picking another. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm going to be watching with everybody else. What I can tell you is, again, Concord, 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 Amherst, Amherst, Amherst. Right. That's what every strategist in New Hampshire is watching.
And, I mean, this is sort of the argument that Nikki Haley's team has been saying, is that Iowa votes and then New Hampshire corrects, right? That's what Nikki Haley.
Don't tell it to Iowa.
Don't tell it to Iowa, but that's what Nikki Haley said flat out before the Iowa caucuses, and she got some flack for that. But look, if you look back to 2016, Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucuses, and then Donald Trump won the New Hampshire primary. Obviously, he went on to win the entire presidency. So I think it's really going to be interesting how tonight plays out.
Well, and in addition to that, there's something else happening, and that, of course, is that Pentagon officials are saying that there was targeted strikes in Iraq by U.S. Military forces to go after 3 sites in Iraq that are backed by Iran and Hezbollah. And so I mentioned that because Nikki Haley's running on this notion of her time serving in foreign policy. Right. Trump, in contrast to that, is saying that he is more of an isolationist foreign policy worldview, and his campaign has had the messaging behind him and the folks at his rallies holding up signs that say peace through strength. So while President Biden is staring this down, and in Delaware they're watching this, they're arguing that the Republican apparatus would lead to more chaos, which equals conflict, and that they're preventing conflict from spreading. Trump world is arguing the direct opposite, which is that his approach would prevent conflict from spreading, which they argue Biden did. I mention all that because I think that we are on the cusp of an election where foreign policy, whether it's China, Taiwan, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, I don't think we've seen an election in our lifetimes, with the exception of maybe after 9/11, where foreign policy was so much on the minds of voters.
And this is something we're going to see Nikki Haley try to capitalize on because of her time at the UN.
And Trump.
And Trump. There's something. There was an interesting exit poll I want to touch on here. It's from CNN. The opinion of the candidate you voted for. So Trump folks said that 77% say they strongly favor him. 3% said they dislike the opponent. Nikki Haley, though, 33% said they strongly favor Nikki Haley. 39% said they dislike Nikki Haley's opponents. Do you think that that could be some fear about matters like foreign policy, about matters that anything that former President Trump stands for compared to Nikki Haley?
Oh, and it gets into the whole notion, we were talking about this off air. If Trump gets convicted, does he lose the election? Does that turn off swing voters in a general election? I don't know. But I know I'm going to be watching.
I mean, that's going to be a big thing to see.
Get your popcorn ready, Schnell.
Absolutely.
If it's an early night, by the way, it's good for Trump. If it's a long night, it's good for Haley.
And we will be here the entire time to bring updates.
I don't know where else I'd rather be.
Absolutely not. The Hills, Kevin Cirilli, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next hour with another update on America's Vote 2024.